light discussion. We are going to talk about pumps. Those who are operating steam locomotives or who are building steam locomotives, we invite criticism and we invite questions and discussions. Will somebody please time us to a half hour?
You got it.
Yeah. 7 minutes after it. All right. At a half hour, let's cut it off, okay?
If you won't take my watch, I'll leave it here. I got the stopwatch running.
Okay.
Yeah, it's running, huh?
We have all seen it happen so often. A fella builds a locomotive, builds a beautiful piece of equipment in the way of rods, in the way of valve gear, machining his wheels, framework, puts a nice boiler on it, nice tender, and has a nice locomotive. Then when he goes to run it, he finds out he doesn't have the water capacity to get water to his boiler. He has put in pumps, but he's got the wrong kind of pumps. And we would like to start with talking about the various kind of pumps. The hand pump, which is usually located in the tender. I call it an insurance pump. I can recommend it for the novice who is building a locomotive and who isn't too familiar with the other operating pumps, because if they run out of water or start to run out of water in the boiler, there's always a hand pump. And that gets to be a chore, especially in hot weather. So after a while, the builder or the owner of the locomotive decides that he better do something else besides that hand pump. So that might lead us to the discussion of, on the older type engines like the Riddles have, the crosshead pumps. Now you have seen these working on the Riddle engine, which is a very good source of water if the flow of water is judged right, or if it can be manipulated right. I have seen crosshead pumps put on locomotives, and I think it happened down at Coster's place about 6 or 7 years ago. Ralph Richards came in with an engine. He had a crosshead pump on each crosshead. And after he went twice around the track, boy, he had water coming out of his stacks, just filling up. So he immediately thought he's got too much water, and he did have too much capacity, I should say. And he took one of them off, and it works beautifully with just one crosshead. So a crosshead pump is a very simple kind of a pump. It's just a ram type that goes back and forth, sucks water into it, and then pushes it out into the boiler through a system of checks. And they're usually perform very well, and they are good sources of water. Another kind of pump is the axle pump. This works very similar to a crosshead pump, but usually has more capacity than a crosshead pump. I think most all of the axle pumps are made about 3/4 of an inch diameter, unless it's a dual pump, and that could be then 3/8 of an inch diameter, with a stroke of 5/8 of an inch up to 1 inch, depending on the size of the boiler. A lot of people don't like crosshead pumps, not crosshead, axle pumps. Their argument is it wasn't on the prototype. That's true. I don't know. Somebody else could answer that. I do not believe that the prototype carried axle pumps on them. But they are a good, faithful type of pump. Usually pretty well maintenance-free, as long as you can control the amount of water that they're handling. If you have valves in there that would put too much water into the boiler, you'd be right back to where Ralph Richards was. You would be putting too much water into the boiler, so you must control the flow of it. I think almost everybody who are running engines that are prototyped after engines of the 1920s and 30s and 40s has axle pumps operating for them. because, like I say, they're pretty well maintenance free. The fourth kind of a pump, in which by far I like the best, is the good old steam pump. Steam driven and can be either a single type like Edison Yoder has on his, or it can be a duplex like others have. This is the pump that you see hanging on the outside of a boiler, and you see it going like this. Pumping water continuously by steam. They require maintenance, but I think the nice part of a steam pump is the little chugging noise that they make in the exhaust, just like the prototype. Some of us go so far as to put the exhaust up into the stack where you can hear it even better. The fifth kind of a pump is the injector. The injector, I think, is the simplest type of pump that there is. I think it requires less maintenance than any other, except for the fact that you must keep it clean. And there are some peculiarities about it. I'm only willing to talk about the injector made by Emery Olenkamp. I think he has the most successful injector that is made. It fits very well on the 1.5" scale. It works very well if it's installed right, and if you keep it clean. One of the big peculiarities of it is a lot of fellows you'll hear say, "Oh my gosh, my injector's working beautifully," and then all of a sudden it quits on me. It won't work. Then you start questioning that fellow about the type of tender he has. If he has a tender that has no false tank inside of it, or no airspace between the outside of the tank and the water's up against the outside of the tank, the sun will heat the water that's in the tender. And I've taken some studies on this, and this is for your information. If the temperature is of the makeup water in your tender is 65 degrees or less, you will have no problem with one of Olenkamp's injectors. Works very well, assuming that the insides, the little pieces inside, are clean and not corroded at all. When the water gets up to 75, it still will work all right, but there may be a slowdown on the pickup. When the water gets up to 85 degrees, the slowdown is quite noticeable, but will still inject and work very well. When the temperature of your makeup water in your tender goes to above 90 degrees, if you have any particles of dirt inside your injector, it may not work at all. It'll just sit there and dribble. And you'll wonder what's the matter, and you'll take your injector apart, clean it out, put it back, and you'll find out that it'll want to weep. Even though it will put water into the boiler, it will keep weeping, and when you throttle the water on it to stop the weeping, you get no results. Actually, the Charlotte, North Carolina club, which is now defunct, they don't have 1.5" scale, but they had smaller locomotives. It was such a problem there that they actually put ice cubes into their tender to keep the water cool.
Get a cold drink that
Which is against all principles of trying to convert. Huh? Put a refrigerator in your tender. That's what, no, that is the truth. So when your temperature gets above 90 degrees, in other words, fellas, if you're running just injectors on your locomotive, like Tom Hill has, he's got 2 injectors, 2 Emery Olenkamp, and a steam pump. If he wants his injectors to work well, when he parks his locomotive, if that's what you do with locomotives when you're not using, put it in the shade. It really helps. I try to do that. two of the fellows in our club gave me that beautiful water tower, you know, and I never had any trouble with injection until I got that water tower, and the sun will heat that up, and the water inside there gets awfully hot. When I put it into my tender, it slows down the injectors. So I have found out that when I first start up in the morning, not to put tank water in it, put the cold water from the well into my tender. So anyway, those are the 5 kinds of pumps. All of them work. All of them work well if they're maintained well. I really believe your biggest maintenance is in your steam pumps. But as I say, you enjoy the maintenance on them for what you get out of them. And I think all of us have steam pumps on our, but you couldn't have one on yours. Do you have one steam pump on yours? Do you?
Yeah.
Well, see, there you go. There's a little bitty one that Ray Lawrence has got. But I think, Charlie, you're going to put a horizontal one on yours, you were telling
On the
me.
shade, yeah, I'm going to put a horizontal one.
It has terrific compensation along the way, just because really it's a miniature steam engine, and it's sitting on top of an engine, and it does real good. Do you have any comments about a steam pump? Now, you've worried with it, Dick.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time. I bought one of Billy Van Brocken's kits, his castings and his drawings, and they're just beautiful. And if on compressed air, it'll pump water like a dream. I pressurized the boiler with compressed air, and it'll pump like a dream, but when I steam the engine, it won't pump. This is a little mystery which I leave unresolved at the moment. But I think the particular thing that I have learned in fooling with these things is that these pumps are generally designed, there are 2 pumps. One is a steam engine on one end and a water pump on the other end. Now the pump on the steam engine has to be a little larger diameter area piston than the water pump. Otherwise you can't pump, because you're pumping against boiler pressure with steam from the boiler. So you have to have these different areas. And I think the principal design fault is that they don't put enough differential, because these pumps being small and have to be carefully lined with sealing glands and piston packing and all, there's a lot of friction involved. And you've got to have enough difference in area between these two, the pump side and the engine side, to overcome that and still pump. And that's where this pump I have, I think, falls deficient, because I have trouble with it. If I ever build another one, I would give myself a little more differential between the steam side and the water side.
Yeah, that's very important.
Now, there's 2 ways. May I just say another word?
Sure.
I think these pumps are great, and I intend to quit my engine with it. But there's 2 ways of doing it. One, as John said, is the Worthington type with alternate motion like this. There's 2 ways to achieve that. One is by cross-connecting the valves by levers, and that is the kind I have. And those are a very aggravating thing to work on, because they're so tiny and you can't get in there to work on anything. But Ralph Richards has come up with I think is a real solution. He cross-connects by cross-connecting the steam passages behind in a plate, so that the valve on this side is transferring the steam to the pump on the other side through these cross-connected channels in the back. Am I trying to describe this right? Yeah. And that's neat and nifty as a pin, and you don't have all these levers flying around and trying to get it adjusted. So this is the direction I'll go, and I've talked to Ralph about it. His pumps run great.
Very good. You may wonder, well, what kind of pump should I use on my locomotive? This is to the novice builder, or to the fellow that maybe has got 1 or 2 pumps on. I recommend at least 3 pumps on your locomotive. Different pumps. An axle pump, as I pointed out, is simplicity itself. The steam pump is a maintenance item. And an injector is a real good way of putting water in your boiler. If you have failure on one, close the rascal down and use your other 2 pumps. An axle pump, as you can understand, will only pump while you're moving. So you have to have a pump that's available when you're standing still. So that's why I say an axle pump, a steam pump, and an injector. The injector on a small 1.5" scale boiler has this deficiency. It fills your boiler up very rapidly with water and knocks your steam pressure back right now. If you have a propane burner or an oil burner and you have this problem, you can always turn your fire up to compensate for the lost steam. You can do this with coal too, but it's a little more aggravating because you got to get in there and shuffle around a bit and put coal on it. But with propane or oil, you can turn it up right now or turn it right back right now. So it's best to have the in a small boiler, I'm talking about filling up quick, because the capacity of an 1.5" is a quart a minute, I believe. Is that right? Does anybody remember that? A quart a minute at 120 for an injector at 125 pounds pressure.
The one that injector you're talking about, he tells you how much it's supposed to be almost a quart a minute.
Yeah, I think that's what it is, a quart a minute. In a small boiler, that fills up quite rapidly and knocks back your steam pressure. So you got to bring your pressure up. So, but you don't have to leave it on so long either. You can turn it on and turn it off immediately. And this is where a steam-driven pump that we were talking about, a duplex pump, you can throttle it down so it barely moves. Was Edison Yoder here? Did he leave?
No, he had to leave.
He's got a single stroke pump in that rascal, and you wouldn't believe it's moving. And it pumps plenty of water into his boiler. Does a beautiful job. But if you have a duplex, you can throttle those things down so that they move just like this, up and down. If your boiler's very small, you may not want to run it all the time. If it's big, I keep one running all the time, 100% of the time, while my engine's under steam.
Supposing that you're building an engine and you're getting ready to equip the engine, the question then comes up, how big a pump do I need?
Yeah, good question.
Well, it's an important question because I made the mistake in my 1-inch engine of building a pump that wasn't big enough. I took advice from somebody and he gave me a wrong lead, or I misunderstood, so I don't have enough adequate pump capacity. So I think that you will need some way to decide how big a pump you need, how much. So the only way you can find that out is to talk to somebody who runs his engine enough to give you some information. And so I went immediately to my friend to my left here to get that information.
I remember.
And John told me how many gallons of water he uses, or how far he runs to pump a gallon of water, and how much he uses on his engine. Well, since his cylinders are about the same place as mine, I started to use that as a factor. And I figured out that he ran 1,400 feet to pump a gallon of water. So I designed my engine, which has smaller wheels, only 51-inch wheels, against his big wheels, and I turned more, I proportioned a pump that would pump my small wheel engine, pump a gallon of water in 1,400 feet of running, which would be more revolution, so I need a smaller pump. So I came up then with a 3/4-inch bore and a 5/8 stroke, and have a pump exactly the same amount of water you pump. Yeah. So you have to, otherwise you're going to end up disappointed. You're going to have a pump that doesn't supply the needs of your boiler.
Yeah, that's exactly true. And on that 040 that we're making, I went back to the figures we got from Dick. We figured the thing out, and I just checked with you yesterday, and it came up with exactly the same answer. On 5,200 feet of running, a mile of running, that 040 on this actual pump is pumping 3.4 gallons of water. If the throttle is open all the time, the water side of it. So we have to cut back on it. Going up the hills, we always close off our axle pumps anyway. Going up the grades. So It's always best. Really, this is where so many of us fail. And I'll admit my failure on it when I built my locomotive. It's always best to have too much water supply and not enough.
You only put a bypass on that pump.
I'm talking about total pumps.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. On the axle pump, you must have a bypass. But more than that, that's why I said, put on 3 pumps on your locomotive. Because you say, oh my goodness, one pump is going to, like Dick said, 1,400 feet, we're going to pump a gallon of water. Well, that is true. But suppose that 1,400 feet is uphill, and you're using a lot of steam because you got your throttle open. You're going to have to pump more water. So you're going to need an auxiliary pump. You're going to need another pump, a steam pump, a steam-driven pump. And you can always open that up to supply your boiler. So don't ever shy your boiler of water when you're figuring on making it. Have plenty of supply available. That's right.
John, are you aware that there is some scales and some drawings, some figures in live steam on year 71 or 72 engineering data in some magazine in live steam in the area of I think 70 or 71? They gave some stuff on.
Asking me?
Well, I'm asking either one of you. Are you aware of that?
I didn't go back to that because
Probably none.
I never saw it, and I wasn't aware of it. But it'd be interesting to look it up. But
There
it's
is
so
some
easy to
stuff
figure.
in there. I don't know how good it is,
It's so
but
easy
there
to
is.
calculate that it's hardly worthwhile going back to find somebody else. I just made a table up
Yeah,
with all the proportions.
yeah.
And you see, you're limited on stroke by how big an eccentric you can put on the wheel axle.
Oh, yeah.
And I could not get more than 5/8 stroke because I had large axles and the eccentric got too big. So then I had to proportion the bore of the piston to get my displacement, see?
Yeah.
But I worked all these combinations out of bore and I made a little table.
Well, maybe we're not all as good at figuring as you are, and not many of us have access to the that far back on Live Steam magazine. But I just mentioned that
I've
there's
never
some
seen
stuff
it.
in there
It'd be interesting
on
to
it.
look it up, yeah.
No, I didn't just subscribe to live steam
I
back
don't
in
think
the
I
day.
even have it.
And I don't have back there.
What about tender hand pumps in the tender, John? You recommend that also? That would add a 4th pump on a...
Yes, for the
Locomotive?
beginner I would. I think it's
That's the fire extinguisher on your engine.
yeah, that is insurance. That if something goes wrong and you're not quite familiar with your injector, you're not quite familiar with your axle pump or some other, if everything else fails, you've always got that. But when the temperature is 95 degrees out and you're pumping against 125 pounds pressure, it gets to be at shore, and first thing you know, you got calluses on your hands. So right away, you'll learn how to fix the other pumps and let that one go, see?
What I was thinking, though, the advantage of having a tender pump available, not only as an emergency, you also have a convenient method of hydro testing the boiler
Right.
without having
Good hydro
to...
tester. Actually, I've got my locomotive. I got 5 pumps. I got one of each kind, or 2. I got the tender pump, and I've got the injector, and 2 steam pumps, and an axle pump. And
That's where you go when you want to get some information on what you're going to put on your engine.
well, it all came gradually. I didn't put it all on at once. Like I said, I started off with just a hand pump and an axle pump. Well, if the engine derailed, which in those days I had more derailments than anything, and the axle pump isn't working, I had to get some way to get water in it. And in those days, my son John would be helping me, and he would get up there and start pumping, then he'd get tired and go to the other hand, and Jim was too young to handle it in those days. And I learned real quick to put an injector on. And this solves a lot of problems when you're in trouble, or when you're stopped because at a meet when somebody else is in trouble and you have to stop. An injector and the steam-driven water pump come in real handy. Yeah, we got 5 minutes. Any other questions?
How do you do the valving for those pumps? Is there any particular way?
I didn't hear the first part.
How do you do your valving for your relief valves?
For your relief valve,
You got a bypass valve.
On
Would they be on the
a crosshead or a axle pump?
axle, both of them?
Well, on the delivery side of any of those pumps, you just put a T and run a pipe off the like you're going from your pump into your boiler, aren't you?
Yeah.
With your water. Between there, put a T. Okay, and off the T, you run a line right back to your tender, and in there put a ball cock or a valve, so that when you don't want water in your boiler, you close off that valve. I mean, when you want, you open it, and when you open it, the water will not go into the boiler because there's boiler pressure, and she'll want to bypass right back into your tender. And if you look down into your tender when you're running, you'll see it shooting water.
Well, the pump's got it.
Just like that. When you
Check.
want water into your boiler, you close that valve, and it's
Yeah,
blocked,
oh, yeah,
so the
right.
water has only one place to go, and that's into your boiler. Yes, sir.
We only have a few more minutes. I'm talking about this pump. The trouble I had was air locking. So you must, on any of these pumps, have some way to bleed this line. And you've got to open this bleed and make sure that the water is coming, and then close it, and so it pumps into the boiler. Because if you have air in the pump, the boiler pressure is such that the ram comes down and compresses the air in there, but it doesn't get up to boiler pressure, and so when the pump goes back on the stroke, you just expand the air and you just keep doing it, nothing happens.
Yeah.
You've got to make sure that you don't have any air in there. The compressible air, you got to have water in there. And there's two ways of doing it. One is put a bleed on it. Now you check me if I'm wrong here. The other way to do it is to direct your hand pump in the tender through this pump, so that you always, when you pump through the hand pump, you flush out the system and flush out the air.
That can be done, yes.
Would your bypass line do the same thing?
No, because once you got the air in there, it just compresses and goes back and forth. And see, if you got 125 pounds in the boiler, and the ram stroke is quite short, you may only build up 80 pounds compressed air, and it won't pump against the boiler. So when the thing comes back, you just expand and compress the air in there, and nothing happens.
It's best to put a bleeder valve in there, and if you think, gee, I got 4 pumps and I'm going to put on and a valve costs $5, $6, I don't know what they cost today. You can always put a union in there and crack the union. That's all you have. Just let the air out, and that's all you have to do. Some guys do just crack the union. And I do recommend on the water side, on the suction side of every pump, to put a filter.
Oh, yeah.
And put a filter in.
And also make sure that it's tight so you don't get air in the system and airlock the pump. You've got to have the suction line tight.
Got to have it tight because you'll suck air if you don't, especially on the injector. And never, fellas, never, you got a brass tender, put any aluminum pieces in there, aluminum rivets.
Is that right, John?
The result is aluminum hydroxide, which looks like milk and magnesia, and gets into your pumps and gets into your filter. Here's the expert on
Yeah.
that.
I did that, and boy, I had the whole thing was filled with these flocculent, isotropic globules of aluminum hydrated oxide, you know, and it would go into a filter and make it absolutely rock solid. You'd run for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and something that's rock solid thing. The only way to do it.
What aluminum were you using?
Well, I had aluminum. I was building a tender in a hurry, and the only kind of angle I could find was this extruded aluminum stuff, and I thought it was great. Made a beautiful tender, but I had a bronze pump in there, and the aluminum was sacrificial to the bronze, and so in the water, I'd get this flocculent, and
Creating a form of electrolysis, right?
Oh yes, but it would form this aluminum. Well, it was more than that. It was aluminum oxyhydroxide, extra oxygen in there. That makes it a flocculent mess, you know. So the way to do that was to was I took the tender apart and got some undercoater, automobile undercoater, and I coated the whole thing inside. It's kind of messy, but
I'll tell you, the pumps are most important to the proper operation of a locomotive. You can't run without good pumps, and most all of us novice builders do not satisfy the boiler's requirements for the water, and we eliminate putting in the proper kind and number of pumps. So go to the heavy side with it.
when I got up there, I asked the question, I don't know why I'm here. Now I know. Because I'm the horrible example that John wanted to.
What is it that General Holloway says? Experience, good judgment is the result of experience, and experience is a result of bad judgment. So Dick did make a mistake on there, but it was a mistake that all of us benefit by. For heaven's sakes,
I was too much of a hurry. I didn't think.
I remember he wanted to finish up his engine and bring it, I think, to
I had 30 days before this meet to build a tender.
yeah, that was it. And,